Well, welcome to the 89th Sunday Assembly, and it is our 20th on Zoom. My name is Alexis Record. I'll be your MC today, and just so you're all aware, this is unusual. We were doing in person. We were doing half in person, half on Zoom, and we have gone back to Zoom temporarily because of Omicron and some of the COVID surges, and we are just keeping up with what recommendations we have for our city and trying to be safe. I believe we were talking in a board meeting and no one on the board could think of, we all had someone who had COVID, but none of us had, so Zoom it was for the meantime anyway. If you are wondering if this is recorded, it is. So you can go ahead and hide your screen if you don't want to be seen. We are also usually offering childcare, but of course today the childcare is you all, which is I think Michelle, when she does MC, she goes, we have the best childcare available. But as a parent, I can say maybe second or third best, honestly. Sunday Assembly is a secular, meaning non-religious community that meets to usually eat snacks in person and drink coffee and catch up and hug. But these days we still try to get together, see each other's faces, and virtual hug and sing songs together and hear from amazing speakers who are experts in their field or are really passionate about what they do, whether it's running a ballet studio or a scientist with a PhD. I always learn something and I get a lot out of the people we bring. And of course, today we have our speaker from Canada, which we can only do when we are on Zoom as opposed to in person. Because this is an online assembly, the one benefit is you get to see people from other assemblies who might not make the drive down otherwise. So if you're from another assembly, go ahead and you can rename yourself and put the name of your assembly in your name section so we can give a shout out or a wave to people who we only really see at the annual conference or on a rare special occasion that we get to see now. Or if you're Diane, your kitty cat. I like seeing pets, so the more the merrier, and kids, and we're all muted, so that's fine. They can't be too disruptive. Everybody will be muted, and that just helps with the singing. Believe me, because when we tried it the one time where we were all unmuted singing together, there was passion, but there was a cacophony of fun as well. So we're all going to stay muted, but we're going to open it up. Paul Svenson couldn't be here today, but he's with us in spirit and on video because we own his image. Now, he's very nice and allowed us to use a song that is one of my favorites because he wrote it for us. So without further ado, Kristen, can you pop that music video on for us?
Oh, welcome to Sunday Assembly. I look on my screen and must say, to familiar old faces and new ones, we're glad that you logged in today. Sing that. We're glad that you logged in today. Hey, we're glad that you logged in today.
Paul Svenson, everyone. Few technical difficulties.
Is over. We hope that you don't have to run. We'd really like to get to know you, so stick around after we're done. Stick around. Oh, stick around after we're done. Stick around after we're done. We'd really like to get to know you, so stick around after we're done. We like to sing songs when we gather, so rock, pop, and ballads we croon. We raise up our voices in verses and sometimes we sing them in tune. Oh, sometimes we sing them tune. Oh, sometimes we sing them in tune. We raise up our voices in verses, and sometimes we sing them in tune. And when we're all done with the program, and after we sing the last song, introduce yourselves to one another, and you won't be a stranger for long. No, you won't. You won't be a stranger for long. Oh, not be for long. Introduce yourself to one another, and you won't be a stranger for long. So welcome to Sunday Assembly. We greet you with wide open door. We're certainly glad that you joined us to live better, help often, wonder more. Live better, help often, wonder more. Live better, help often, wonder more. We're certainly glad that you joined us to live better, help often, wonder more.
Woo! Very nice singing, everyone. I forget that Paul usually reminds me that the words to all the songs are in our program, and it is in the chat, the link to it. So I think it's going right. I think every time I say in the chat, Laura just copy paste. Is that the power? So if you, oh, I think someone just joined, better put it back in the chat. If you have something that is happening in your life, big, small, or in between, go ahead and stick it in the chat and I will read them out and we can read them along. I know so far, this is our Life Happens section of our program, and it's gonna be pretty informal right now. It's just this tight-knit group of us. I know Diane said that the secular outreach booth will not be happening in the next few weeks because of the COVID risks. There was some vandalism that she mentioned to the FFRF display in Balboa Park. So the Statue of Liberty's head got cut off and the word reason got slashed through. So no liberty and reason for you all. Andrew broke his ankle in 2 places in Kansas in November, came back to San Diego to have surgery, is recovering well now. This did change the course of his life. But I feel if something is supposed to be in your path, that will happen anyway. Well, hopefully that ankle gets better. It sounds like it's going well. I saw your crutch earlier and I wondered about that. Anything else? Let's see. Amber, I began work with a nonprofit contracted with the county here in Sacramento as a peer support specialist. Congratulations. I know you were really excited about that. It's getting less likely you're going to move back to San Diego now with your little dream job, so it's okay. I won't be salty about it. Sabine, we got our first foster dog. She's trying to settle in. Her name is Lily. Are you going to hold her up? I'm looking. Yes, everyone stare at Sabine's little square on the grid and then expectantly for a puppy. Yes. Oh my goodness. So little. It's gonna be a big woofie. All right, Amber's promising to visit. So emotional manipulation works. Check. I'll keep that in mind. Let's see. I have some news. My spouse and I have been together 23 years as of this week, 3 days ago. And obviously we got together when I was -5 years old. What else? Let's see. In an alternative reality, Martin Luther King Jr. is 93 years old as of yesterday, celebrating his birthday. We're all going to take it off tomorrow as a country. South Pacific, did anyone hear about the volcano that exploded underwater? Oh my gosh, did you see the pictures? I guess that's super rare. At one point there was a tidal wave or tsunami warning for us here in San Diego for our beaches, but I guess that's no longer really a concern. Although in Hawaii, they were told to stay away from the beaches. Any other news? Let's see. I think that's it. If you have news about your life, big, small, or otherwise, go ahead and stick it in the chat. We'd be happy to read it throughout. Oh, I have one more from Steve. So many things have been happening that I forgot to even mention. Our kid turned 18 this week, and we also have a new cat. All right, Steve, show us the baby. The 18-year-old one or the cat? No preference. There you are. No, can't find the cat. Cats are harder to bring to the screen, I feel. Oh, there it is. Okay. So cute. And so if your kid turned 18, it means you were probably also -5 when you started life. Oh, 1.2 meter wave in Japan. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I just saw the image of a volcano going off underwater, and that's not something you see. Also in Texas news, all of the hostages are safe and alive from the synagogue, including the rabbi. Unfortunately, the man who held them hostage did not survive. And they are going through a trauma and anti-Semitic rhetoric, and they didn't sign up for any of that. So sending a virtual hug over to our friends all over, and the things they go through that I have never gone through and can't even imagine, leading up to being held hostage for 11 hours. All right. Continue to share your lives. I'm going to read all these in the chat, but we're going to move on to our next segment, which is Help Happens, which is if you have a community project in mind that you would like us to do, keep in mind the current environment. Obviously, it is hard to get together and do these cleanups, although that would be completely okay to plan cleanup. It's outdoors, it's, you know, just your own safety precautions, your own level of risk assessment, and we can try to make these things happen. So if you have any ideas, put them in the chat or reach out to someone on the board and we'll try to put that together. I think, Laura, you were gonna share the Help Happens this week.
Hey, everybody. Right now, the Red Cross is experiencing the worst blood shortage in over a decade. And the low blood supply levels mean that some hospitals are deferring major surgeries, including organ transplants. So, okay, so how many of you know your blood type? Raise your hand if you know your blood type. Okay, well, I didn't know that mine was B negative until very recently. Even though my parents joked about my mom being O and then my dad being B positive, giving my older brother BO. Horrible. So when I donated blood last summer and I found out that fewer than 2% of people have my blood type, so it's really hard for them to find donors. The blood bank told me about their membership-based appreciation program, and this is the San Diego Blood Bank. This is where donors agree to donate within 8 weeks of the time that they become eligible. So you give several times a year. And then in return, you get free swag, like gift cards and t-shirts. You can decline those things, but also free swag. And then you get put into a raffle for stuff like airline tickets and movie tickets, stuff like that. So this program is called the Guardian Circle, and you can sign up on the San Diego Blood Bank's website. And you can also schedule a donation date and time and location on the website also. It's super easy. These folks are very professional, in and out, COVID safe. I really encourage everybody who feels like they can go and donate blood. And if you feel like it makes you uncomfortable, or you want to have a partner come with you, or you need a ride, send Sunday Assembly San Diego a note on Facebook, and we'll try to partner you with somebody who can not literally hold your hand during COVID, but maybe drive you or help, walk you through it or talk you through it. We'll do that. So even if you only donate once, please scope out the website and schedule a donation time if you can. You might find out that it's actually easier than you think. Thanks.
Thanks, Laura. And yeah, I was hearing on the radio just driving over here, the San Diego needs blood. And of course, my daughter got a blood transfusion very recently, so I will show you before and after pictures if you want to see what a difference it makes. I'll show you toward the end of our program. Next, we have kind of an exciting reading today because we have Sarah Eddy from Smith College reading 2 poems that she wrote herself. So we have the poetry reading by the poet. So go ahead, Sarah, and unmute. There we go.
Aha, I am unmuted. That's wonderful. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. And it's amazing to be invited to do this and also to be attending Sunday Assembly. It's such an exciting thing and such a wonderful thing that you all do. Something I've thought about starting up myself in Massachusetts. So it's great to be here and see how you run your thing. So I'm reading 2 poems for you today. They're both from a chapbook that I wrote a few years ago called Tell the Bees. I'm a beekeeper myself. I have been for 6 years. And the first of the poems is called Starvation. And I suppose the best way to think about this is that being a beekeeper connects you very directly with the earth and with the problems that we're facing in terms of climate change and other things. So, starvation. In early April, dirty snow and tender shoots snapping under my boots, I hike out to the hives to listen for humming. Ear pressed to the cold wood, I feel my dread crack open. Down in the dark between the frames, the colony mass is frozen. They crouch in a ball pointing to the center, the omphalos that was their queen. There weren't enough of them. Their little bodies weren't enough to keep her warm, and they starved and froze, vibrating with life till the end, so close to honey and pollen. Like the horses in Pompeii, preserved in the traces of harness and cart, almost alive, they labor even in death. In the still frozen garden, holding up this frame of ruin, I feel my belly drop out, and the loss expands outward, larger circles of decimation, extinction, and slow emergency rippling from this gentle decease. Hive upon hive lost, and den and nest, hole and warren, eyrie and byre, all empty, all still. I struggle to pull myself back to just this one hive and what I can do. Okay, and the second poem is entitled Furious. Thank you. It's from a summer, well, it would have been 2015 when I was diagnosed with breast cancer and spent the summer lying on my couch, like going through chemotherapy and everything that went with that. And my bees were out there in the yard, angry. I couldn't do much with them, but I had a mentor who came and took care of the bees once in a while. This is called Furious. That summer when I was sick, lying on the couch day after day, while the chemicals fought their battles in my bloodstream, and my hair came out in curly clumps on the worn green velvet, one of my queens went mad. It started subtly, early in summer when I was still able. Her workers stung me twice, their lancets piercing my thick white suit and my jeans, clearly determined. These were warning shots. A few weeks later, I was already losing track of the world, losing myself to fevers and fear. It was as if she gathered up the pollen dust of my strength and will and spread it through her hive. Her brood became proactive defenders, chasing my neighbors down the road and stinging my Confederate keepers over and over through their suits. They were angry, they were irritable, they had had enough of people poking at them and going through their business. In late summer, feeling stronger, feeling my blood going deep, I put on 2 pairs of pants and 3 shirts, giant mud boots and a thick beekeeping suit, and ventured out to their world. When I cracked the hive, they bubbled out in a fury with months of rage and banged against my helmet, stung my clothes in impotence. I talked to them. I told them it would be okay, that they would flourish, that pollen would be plentiful and nectar would flow like wine. And while I talked, I found the queen. She was long and dark and beetled quickly across the frames, and her furry legs mocked my bald head and my chemo scarf. I grabbed her between my gloved fingers and pinched out her angry life. I gave the hive a new queen, nestled between the frames in a little box, plugged up with sugar. It would take them a day to take in her smell and release her. Within weeks, they were calm and kind and malleable, but I felt the loss of that bitchy queen who made her whole world a place of defense and defiance. They say we must fight the injustice of sickness. We must throw our tiny impotent souls against a wall of cellular division, but there is no fight really, just the doing and the sleeping. The honey that fall was deep and spicy, too complicated for tea. I ate it on toast in small bites, savoring her sweet resentment.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing very personal poems.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the experience of keeping bees feels very personal every day when you do it. Yeah, at least to me. I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be, but thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. And I hope to hear from more poets and maybe Sarah again in the future. And this is a nice treat where our poetry reading can be so personal and from the author's lips. Well, I'm excited to have Dr. Sarah Broccard-Bell with us today. She received her PhD in evolution and behavior through the Department of Neuroscience at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, Canada. She moved to San Diego in 2014 to study honeybees at UCSD and to hang out with her husband, a collaborator and computational neuroscience also at UCSD. Dr. Broccard-Bell's work, drawing on ideas from biology, neuroscience, and computer science, focused on understanding how the organization of honeybee colonies allows them to make decisions in changing environments. Last March, she and her husband returned to Canada, where Dr. Broccard-Bell has begun a new job working for a Canadian company to develop environmentally responsible honeybee health products. It's our great pleasure to welcome Dr. Heather Broccard-Bell.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you, Sarah, for those beautiful readings. It's hard for me to follow that. And I'm glad that I had a little bit of a reprieve there while Alexis introduced me, because I don't think I would have been able to start like right away. So I'm going to share my screen here and I will start my presentation. Okay, got the sound and share. Okay, I assume everyone can see that and that's okay. Okay, cool. All right, so the premise of my talk is to ask you guys a question, whether you think that honeybee colonies can be intelligent. And a lot of my research, as Alexis mentioned, focused on sort of drawing parallels between neuroscience and honeybees. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that and why I think, or I'm going to try to convince you, that honeybee colonies can in fact be intelligent. So before we can ask that question, of course, we have to define what we mean by intelligence. And you can ask, 8 different people what they think intelligence means, and you'll get 8 different answers. You can ask 8 different scientists, they'll give you 8 different answers. Here's a definition that I'm going to give you. It's not the only one out there. So what is intelligence? Intelligence means making appropriate decisions given the information at hand. And that's actually a really important part, because a lot of times, you know, people and other kinds of animals are making decisions, and we see these decisions from a different perspective, and we say, well, you know, why did they do that in that particular instance? And it may not be that they're not intelligent. It may be that they weren't able to see all of the information that we are able to see. So given the information at hand, what was the appropriate decision to be made in that circumstance? Number 2 is changing your behavior, changing your mind when the circumstances change. So you can make an initially intelligent decision, but if the circumstance changes, you have to sort of be willing to change your mind. That's what being truly intelligent is. So making appropriate decisions and then recognizing when those choices aren't working anymore and changing it. Okay, so here I've told you what intelligence is. And again, my goal for this talk was to try to compare the behavior of honeybee colonies with how a brain works. And instead, though, of telling you how a brain works, which would put you guys all to sleep in the next 15 seconds, I am going to hopefully give you an analogy that will both be more familiar and easier to understand, and also make the parallel with honeybee colonies hopefully more clear. So, and it's also a circumstance that you might not think of as being intelligent. It's something that you're probably all familiar with, but maybe you don't think of this as being an intelligent behavior. So let's imagine that in San Diego, 2 new restaurants open up. So we've got restaurant A and restaurant B. Initially, nobody knows anything about either one of these restaurants. Let's ignore the fact that there could have been marketing or whatever else. Let's just pretend that nobody knows anything about them to begin with. But restaurant A serves objectively good food. Restaurant B serves not so good food, right? So at the beginning, when these 2 establishments open, people kind of visit them about equally. But as time goes on, people start to talk to one another. They tell each other about their experiences. Restaurant A was really good. I really enjoyed it. You should go check it out. And then more people start going to restaurant A. On the other hand, people going to restaurant B have a negative experience. They tell their friends, and then people start avoiding restaurant B. Over some periods of weeks, you see that the people in San Diego start to prefer to go to restaurant A. More people are visiting restaurant A. Of course, there's always new people that don't know anything about either restaurant that might happen to end up at restaurant B. But given enough time, the group, which is just the population of San Diego, makes a decision to visit restaurant A because restaurant A has objectively better food. So I would argue that in that case, the group, the population of San Diego, actually made an intelligent decision because they chose the restaurant that was objectively better. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, there's all these other complications when we're talking about human behavior. Sometimes people lie about stuff. There could be unethical marketing and all these other sorts of things happening. But if that isn't happening, and even if it is, we can argue that, that's still intelligent decision-making. It's just that the information that people had access to wasn't correct, right? Over enough time, again, the group, the population of San Diego picks restaurant A over restaurant B. And this was in the absence of anyone, there's sort of like not one person telling them that they have to go to restaurant A. So the group made an intelligent decision without any help from the outside. So what happens if something changes? What happens if, say, the chef at restaurant A goes on sabbatical and they bring in someone else who isn't as experienced? And now all of a sudden you've got what was formerly a good restaurant serving bad food or worse food. And restaurant B realizes that people are being driven away by the quality of their food. And so they hire a new chef. So now you've got restaurant B that was formerly bad, serving good food. Now, if these changes happen at about the same time, you see what you had seen in the recent past, which is most people are going to visit restaurant A because that's the information that they have. The most current information that they have is that restaurant A is still good. But once again, as time goes on, people start actually going there and having a good or a bad experience, and they start telling other people, you know, they can have conversations or they can write Yelp reviews or whatever else, but they're sharing information. And eventually the group that had formerly chosen, quote unquote, restaurant A now will shift to restaurant B. So we've got group behavior that meets at least my definition of what is intelligent. So you've made the appropriate decision, given the information at hand, and you've changed your mind when something changes. And once again, and it's important for my point here, no one told anyone to switch. No one told anyone which place to go. Now, by no one, I mean no one, there was no law that was enacted. There was no government organization telling them that they needed to go there. Of course, people are telling each other their experiences, right? And there, of course, are people who are more or less influential, but there's no single person that's directing the behavior of this group, because it's really a loosely connected group. You know, they're all people that live in San Diego or at least visiting San Diego. So that's how groups of humans can make decisions. How is that related to brains? Why did I tell you that story? Well, like I said before at the beginning, I didn't want to explain to you how a brain worked in detail because that's complicated. But how a brain works is actually very similar to how those humans made decisions. So both human groups and brains are made up of many individuals. A lot of times we don't really think of brains as being made up of individuals, but they are. The functional unit in a brain is a brain cell or a neuron. In a group of people, of course, the functional unit is a human, right? So in both brains and groups of people, we have individuals. The individuals in both of those systems gather information and share it with each other. In the human group, they gather information by having experiences at the restaurant, but also by talking to each other. So the information that someone gets before they go to a restaurant at all is usually going to be other people telling them what their experiences were like. But once they go there, then they have their own experience to share as well. So they have their own experience on top of whatever they were told, and then they can share that with other people. Brain cells actually work very similarly. So brain cells communicate with their neighbors. So they get information from the surrounding brain cells. They also get information from the outside, from the sensory organs that collect. So when you taste something, when you hear something, when you see something, all that information is getting sent to your brain cells, right? So they're having direct experiences like going to a restaurant, and they're getting information from their neighbors. So from the other individuals in that group, which is other brain cells. All of the individuals, be it brain cells or humans, have their own individual behavior. That's because both humans and brain cells, surprisingly enough, have their own unique set of characteristics. So just like every one of us is kind of like our own special snowflake, so are brain cells. Brain cells have each and every single brain cell has a slightly different set of properties than its neighbor. So they're not all identical clones. They can be different. So they can react slightly differently to the information that they get, just like people do. And this might come as a surprise. In the groups of people, nobody's telling them what to do. In brains, there's no director brain cell that directs the brain in carrying it out its activities. Now, if you're an individual that has a brain, your brain is doing all this stuff. The individual's brain cells in your brain are working together, sort of not in an intentional sort of way, but that's what happens. And whether or not you do something, so the decision that you make as an individual is based on the overall, what's happening over all of those brain cells together. Just like if we look at the groups of people visiting restaurants in San Diego, what's happening isn't a function of a single person, right? Because people can be accidentally going to the bad restaurant, or maybe they prefer to eat bad food, but the group as a whole is largely visiting the good restaurant, right? And similar to brain activity, where you're going to make a decision, that decision is going to be based on the collective activity of all the brain cells in your brain, but not every single one of them is going to be sort of endorsing the same decision. There might be one or two that are saying no. So it doesn't really matter from that perspective what an individual is doing, but collectively they're making a decision. Okay, so we've got humans choosing restaurants, we've got brains and brain cells acting together. How does this relate to bees? But before we get there, so we've got this intelligent behavior, right? So we've got human groups that are intelligent, we've got individual humans. Most people would agree that individual humans can be intelligent. Some evidence to the contrary. And the question is, maybe humans can be intelligent as individuals or in groups just because we have really complicated brains and we have really complicated ways of communicating with one another. So maybe that's what it comes down to. Like we've got this intelligence emerging from those, the way that we're put together, again, because our brains are complicated and we have complicated ways of talking to each other, language and writing and the computer and everything else. So maybe that's just it. Well, let's consider the honeybee. So honeybees have 90,000 times fewer brain cells in their brains than humans. Humans have about 86 billion brain cells. Honeybees have slightly less than 1 million. So 90,000 times fewer. Modern neuroscience, by and large, says that the more brain cells you have, the more intelligent you can be. So if that's the case, then honeybees should be less intelligent. However, just like us, honeybees also need to solve problems. So they need to make good decisions, and they need to do it in a world that changes all the time. So honeybees, the ones that we're used to, these ladies here, have been introduced. They're originally from sort of Europe and Asia, and they've been introduced to every continent now except for Antarctica. So they're everywhere. Well outside of their native range to which they're adapted. So they live in this world that isn't constant, and not only that, it's a world that many of them are actually not even evolved to live in. So they need to solve problems in a world that changes all the time. What kind of problems do they need to solve? Well, lots of them, but I'm going to talk about one in particular because it's more related to the restaurant analogy that I gave you, and also it happens to be the subject of what I studied for the last 7 years in San Diego. And this is the problem of gathering food. So honeybees live in these colonies. I'm sure you're all aware that they live in colonies. What's a honeybee colony though? Well, a honeybee colony can be anywhere from about 100 individuals to 100,000 individuals. So they can range in size from really small to really large. I think probably most of you are aware that the honeybee colony has a queen, and then there's a bunch of other bees in there, right? All the ones in the picture here are workers. Workers are actually all female, and they're all sisters. So a honeybee colony is actually a big family. The males look a little bit different. Their eyes are bigger and their bodies are actually a little bit larger. Those are called drones. There are usually not as many of them, actually always not as many of them in the colony as workers. And that's because their only job in life is literally to mate with a queen. That's all they do. The workers, again, all the females in the colony, they do everything else. And honeybee life is complicated. So they raise babies, they feed their babies, they do housekeeping, they do undertakings, so removing dead bees from the colony, they do guarding, so some of the bees are guarding the entrance of the colony, and some bees go out and forage for food. Honeybees eat nectar and pollen, so they have to go find good flowers that have nectar and pollen and bring them back to the colony. Honey is made out of nectar from flowers. Just to get back to the colony organization for 1 second further here, the queen doesn't actually tell them what to do. So a lot of people are under this misconception that the queen is directing the behavior of the colony. At sometimes that is kind of true. So if they're moving to a new location, everybody in the colony kind of follows the smell of the queen. So in that instance, she kind of is telling them what to do, but she doesn't tell them what to do in their day-to-day lives. So she doesn't tell them, for instance, how to gather food or where to gather food. She has nothing to do with that. Her job is to lay eggs. The queen is everyone's mother. Nobody else in the colony lays eggs under normal circumstances. Okay, so we've got this honeybee colony. Individually, honeybees have much smaller brains than humans, but they need to solve problems in worlds that are changing all the time. And one of the problems is gathering food. How do they do that? Well, it turns out that honeybees have their own version of restaurant reviews. So just like you can write a Yelp review and read someone else's Yelp review, honeybees can do the same thing for patches of flowers that they visit. And as a consequence of this, they're able to really optimize how they gather food, which means that they're able to take advantage of the environment in a much more efficient way than other groups of animals are. So the way that they do this is they basically have two different sets of signals. So two different ways of communicating with each other. We've got the waggle dance, which is kind of like their version of a positive review of a restaurant, and a stop signal, which is kind of like their version of a negative review. And I'm going to show you what they look like. Probably most of you have heard of a waggle dance or heard that bees communicate using dances before. Maybe you haven't seen it though. Oh, what happened there? Okay, so here we go. So this on the left-hand side here, you can see this bee has come back from a flower. She's got pollen stuck to her legs and she's making this weird motion. She's wiggling her butt. She's stopping, turning. So wiggles her butt, walking in a straight line, turns around. And you can see these other bees in the colony are actually watching her, right? You can see they're touching her with their antennae. So she's actually communicating. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but you can ask me later on to explain exactly how this works. But basically this movement tells the other bees in the colony how to find the good patch of flowers that she's been to. So bees will only do this if they think that the quality of the flowers that they're visiting is high. So they'll come back to the colony and they'll basically tell other bees how to find it, right? And other bees that are watching this waggle dance now get the directions, the distance, and the direction from the colony, how to get to that good patch of flowers. And this is all with a brain that has less than 1 million neurons. Amazing. And this is on the individual level. So the longer she does that dance for, the more bees that can watch her and the more bees that can find that same location. So basically, the longer she does the dance, the better she thinks that resource is. And the more she thinks that the colony should sort of redirect more foragers to go to that location. And that way, honeybees are able to take advantage of the very best flowers, much more so. There are closely related species of bees like bumblebees that don't do this sort of thing. In a bumblebee colony, bumblebees also live in colonies, they don't talk to each other. So basically everyone that goes out to collect food and they eat the same kind of food has to start afresh every day. So the best they can do is remember where a good patch was the day before, but they don't talk to each other. In the honeybee colony, the word can spread basically. So that's a positive restaurant review in a honeybee colony. Negative review in a honeybee colony is this thing called a stop signal. So we've got a waggle dancer. Once again, I'm going to play this clip a few times because it's a little bit hard to see. We've got a waggle dancer. And then you see another bee will come in, this bee here, and butt her head against the side of that waggle dancer. And if you watch closely, that waggle dancer then pauses, right? So she stops for a second. That's actually why the signal is called the stop signal. At the same time as this head butter bee hits this waggle dancer, she actually makes a sound. And I'll play the little sound for you here. It's like a little beep sound, right? And it's actually the beep that makes that waggle dancer pause for a second. Bees are really sensitive to vibrations. In fact, a lot of their communication, both in the waggle dance and in the stop signal, is about vibration more than anything else. So that little vibration makes the waggle dancer stop for a second. And although it doesn't always stop her from continuing waggle dancing, sometimes it does. So we call this an inhibitory signal. It just sort of dampens down the propensity to spread that message. So, and ultimately what the effect of that is that fewer bees will go to that flower. Now, why would they do that? Why would they give a flower a negative review, especially a flower that was good enough to perform a waggle dance for? Well, as the day goes on, predators change location. So a spider might all of a sudden be on that flower. And if a bee goes there and she has a close encounter with a spider, she's going to come back and find other bees that are doing that waggle dance and say, stop, like, don't tell anyone to go there anymore, right? It's bad now. Another time that she would do it is if that flower is crowded. So if there are too many other bees hovering around that flower, then that's like not a really great place to eat anymore, right? So she comes back and she says, stop. Right. So it's not exactly the same as the restaurant reviews and telling each other what's a good and bad restaurant in San Diego, but it's very, very similar. So over time, bees are able to forage the most at the best flowers. And if those flowers start to become bad, they can shift to better ones so they can make good decisions. And they make good decisions in ways that are very similar to how brains work and very similar to how groups of people work. So I ask you, given the evidence that I have just presented to you, what do you think? Do you think honeybee colonies are smart? And that is all I have.
Thank you so much, Heather, for sharing that with us. That was the cutest noise I've ever heard. I think I have a squeaky toy at home that makes that noise.
I was telling Laura when we were doing sound check before, I studied that noise for 7 years and I hear that thing in my sleep. I hear it in my dreams.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate you coming today.
Thank you for having me once again. It was fantastic.
I was under the impression like the queen sat on a throne and went, you do this and you do that. So this is new information that I appreciate. I feel really bad how often my chickens we call them spicy jalapenos. They would
Yeah.
eat the bees
Jalapeno
out
sky
of the
raisins.
And now that I know about the neuron thing, I know for a fact chickens have like 2.5 neurons in their whole head. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Chickens are, my family had chickens when I was growing up, and I don't know if I would put them on the same level as honeybees, honestly.
Yeah, I have a flower tattoo on my ankle. It got pecked every day. Like, it's not a flower. But anyway, thank you so much for coming and teaching us about bees. And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, our next, I think this is where I turn it over to Paul Svenson, but he again is, not here. I was going to make a joke about exploring volcanoes under the sea. But I actually don't remember why he's not here. It wasn't COVID. It's not something terrible. It's just he couldn't make it and gave us permission to share one of his songs. This is actually my favorite song he does. And it's a song that I appreciate only in Paul's voice. Like, we have a bedtime song I sing my kids, and I played them the original once, and they're like, that's not very good. They preferred like bedtime song. The song was the theme song to Firefly, but so not a traditional bedtime song. And the original was like twangy in a guy's voice, and they're like, but it's not happy bedtime sounding. And that's how I feel about Paul's music. When he does covers of things, I actually prefer them over the originals often. And this is my favorite. So if I stalled long enough, are we good?
This is an easy little song. If you don't know it, it's easy to pick up. You'll catch the tune, then you can join in. Or you can just make up your own tune because nobody else can hear you. Doesn't matter to me, it's a folk song. Here we go. To be humble, to be kind, it is the giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend, to give in such a way that has no end. We are loved, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace and we are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. Let's do that chorus again, now you get it. Oh, we are love, we're one. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace and we are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. To be bold and to be brave, It is the thinking that the heart can still be saved, and the darkness can come quick. The danger's in the anger and hanging on to it. And we are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace when we are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. A little different here. Tell me what it is that you see. A world that's filled with endless possibilities. Heroes, they don't look like they used to. They look like you do. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace and we are war, and we are how we treat each other, nothing more. One more time on the chorus. We are love, we are one, we are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace and we are war, yes, and we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. Oh, we are how we treat each other, nothing more.
I love Paul. My favorite line to that song is, heroes don't look like they used to, they look like you do. And I think that is a great transition to what I want to talk about near the end of our program today. So when we first learned that we were going to be talking about bees, every assembly has a theme, and the theme this assembly is hive mind. And with that in mind, I think the bee setup where everybody works toward a common goal is one that when humans in a group have done the same, have come close to the bees model, it's a beautiful thing. And I can think about that happening spontaneously. It's actually always just bizarre and a miracle when it happens spontaneously. One example I can think of is after the Crest fire. I was living in El Cajon at the time, and the fire actually did come right up to where we were living on the property. And we evacuated, and people were taking in people, and people were on the roads directing traffic, and it happened just so fast. I remember driving with a suitcase full of underwear and not my computer, not my personal documents. Like, my panicked brain thought, I will need underwear, and just took all of it and ran. Now we have a fire plan, which I highly recommend, where you grab your filing cabinet and your safe and underwear. You can get anywhere, it turns out. But I remember driving with fire in my rearview mirror and on the side of the road, and people out there directing me, directing all the cars to get out as quickly as possible. And then a few days later, when we went to Crest after it was cleared for volunteers to go in, and walking around and seeing the blackened slabs everywhere. And no one was directing us. People just showed up. And I was one of the people just showed up. I was a college kid, nothing else to do. And people were just dropping off carloads full of extra clothes or jeans or toiletries. And just a bunch of us just started putting up, someone brought tables, someone went home and came back with like hangers and racks. And one of my jobs was just folding clothes, putting them up, helping people with families come up and pick out clothes for their kids for that week. And people were always like, okay, I have 3 kids these ages, what can I get? and they would take one thing and you had to encourage them, let's clothe them for the week and make sure they have what they need. And people were always just like, oh my gosh, really? And I was like, I don't know, I just showed up. I assume. And nobody was, you know, directing people. One of my friends, once the fire department cleared one of the slabs, started digging through it. And we were all covered in gross from this work. And people were passing out like dish rags, you know, those gloves that you wash your hands or wash your dishes with so they don't get filmy. We were just having those, anything anyone could bring, and we were digging through rubble. And one of the guys that went to college with me, something shiny caught his eye, and it turned out to be a gold wedding band that belonged to someone's grandfather, that when he gave it back to the family, because the families are just standing around like zombies. There's just this community effort in the middle of this tragedy that is beautiful. And I remember the tears. I remember me crying, and I had nothing to do with this family. But what I want to talk about today, and what I am even more passionate about actually, is when we have the infrastructure in place that is purposeful, to where we work together and no one has to wonder, can I take extra clothes, or what should I do? Because as humans, we have the ability, unlike some other animals, most other animals, all other animals, to think of the future and plan for it in a very specific way. It causes us anxiety, but it also helps us build the infrastructure that we need to help people before they go through trauma and tragedy, to see that threat coming. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. I also am not super fast at this. Share. Here we go. Everybody see that? Okay. There we go. So if anyone recognizes this, this is a village from the Legend of Zelda, Kakariko Village. So it takes a village. And this is my personal story of the surgery that my daughter went through the day before Thanksgiving, so 7 weeks ago. And this is my daughter. This was right before surgery. We had 2 weeks before surgery, Halloween. And she wanted to be Ursula. And so that is a lot of pool noodles and plastic wrap and purple dye and wire. And if you notice how she's sitting in her chair, see how she kind of looks straight? She doesn't look like she has a big curve in her spine, but that sucker was getting worse by the minute. And as her mom, I didn't notice it, and I live with her. It took us going to the Mutter Museum, which is it's kind of a body oddity medical science museum in Philadelphia, where we saw a skeleton of someone with severe scoliosis, and she asked what that was and if she had it. And I remember saying, no, you don't have scoliosis. You have lordosis and you have arthrogryposis, but you don't have scoliosis. And then she was diagnosed with scoliosis the next day at Shriners Hospital for Children in Philadelphia. And then we needed to get surgery, and we needed it sooner rather than later. And to get in perspective, she didn't have scoliosis the year before this. It was onset by puberty, and it was aggressive, and it went from 0 to 60 in a year, which means one of her curves was 63 degrees, but it went from straight to 63 degrees. Her body was off track. If it had kept going, we would reduce her lung function, squeeze her heart, and cause paralysis. So now we are getting surgery, and just like me assuming that the queen sat on a throne in the bee colony and went, you do this, you do that, you could simplify our experience to a surgeon came, did surgery, the end. And this is her back with her trying to sit up straight. And this is going into surgery. But really, the surgeon needed a lot of infrastructure, right? It wasn't one person that did this thing that saved my daughter. It was a whole educational system that trained and educated this person. It was a team, a hospital staff, which includes food service, which includes admin, which includes nurses, obviously, which includes phlebotomists, which my kids call vampires, to take and type blood, which includes people specialized in every single thing you can imagine, people keeping on top of the equipment, people making the rods that went in, making the surgical screws, and the anesthesiologist who kept my daughter asleep and comfortable, the PA who did some of the surgery, and the medical students all there, everybody working together, this whole infrastructure before you even, you know, start to think about a surgery of this magnitude. Speaking of blood transfusions, it also took our community, and our community includes blood donors. And do you want to see a before and after? This is before blood transfusion. This is after blood transfusion. Ghost child, healthy child, someone whose oxygen levels tanked, body temperature tanked, and blood pressure tanked dangerously low, to someone who could be happy and healthy and typically functioning. I don't know if you can read my shirt. Together in heart, even when apart was a shirt given to me by other families who have been through the surgery and our big arthrogryposis community. And the AMC in the heart is her condition, arthrogryposis multiplex congenita, which is a condition you get at birth and just means you have stuck joints, and it comes in her case with muscles that didn't grow. And the AMC mascot is the bee, and it is the bee because as the saying goes, you might look at a bumblebee and think that will never fly, it's too big, but the physics work perfectly and it flies. So just like that, you might look at a person with arthrogryposis and think they'll never be able to live fulfilling lives, or they'll be able to do certain things, and you cannot tell by looking. They often amaze us. And this was hand crocheted by the AMC grandmas, which is a group of grandmas who have AMC or have family members with AMC. And then our grand community, I think those balloons came from our grandparents' neighbors, just everybody working together, the hospital putting up Christmas decorations, because we got this surgery the day before Thanksgiving, and us getting to see the crane. And then the Ronald McDonald House next door, who on Thanksgiving night fed all of us turkey sandwiches, because of COVID, we couldn't go in and sit down. So they did sack lunches, and it was turkey sandwiches, a cup of yams, and this teeny tiny persimmon, which is my favorite fruit and also made me feel so loved. I took like 20 pictures of this thing. And then our doctors advocating for us for insurance to cover our hospital bed, our team at Scope Orthotics that made her brace, which you usually don't get after the surgery, but all of her movements require bending her back because she doesn't have muscles in her arms and legs. And so they needed extra protection there, and then got us home safely. And this is her back before and after. The one on the right was the curve that was still curving, and the one on the left is the worst of the curve being stopped. They couldn't fuse the whole back because of her arthrogryposis, so they just did the worst of it so that she won't have to risk paralysis, she won't have to risk squishy lungs, squishy guts. And the thing is we would not be where we were without a whole community of people working together. And it wasn't spontaneous, so it's not as fun a story. Always the infrastructure in place, the purposeful placement of infrastructure helped us and helps other people. And my point of this MC address and my point of the story, the whole conclusion is maybe your gift is being a surgeon, and it's this huge deal, but maybe your gift is being a food worker who came and delivered food to someone who needed it, and then realized that they were sick and pulled saltine crackers out of their pocket. And we're like, I always have these on hand because my daughter threw up for a week straight. Or maybe your gift is administration. That's something I really am good at. I probably could never cut someone open because I would pass out, but I could schedule a surgery. I could be a caregiver to someone who needed it. And everyone's gift is different. Everyone has a position in this community, and we are all needed and all very valuable. And I appreciate the community so much for helping my family through this. And I appreciate the infrastructure that can help the next family as well. So with that, I just want to lead us into our moment of silent reflection. Okay, thanks everyone for hanging in there with us. We have a few announcements before we wrap up. Some recurring events: Taco Tuesdays, TALKO Tuesdays is on Zoom at 6 p.m. Just to chat, check in, get some connection, especially when we're going back into another stay-at-home kind of situation for a lot of us. That really helps just mental health. Even if you're like, oh, I'm fine. Sometimes it's good to just say, hey. Categories also on Zoom. It's the second and fourth Thursday of each month at 7. You can go on our Facebook page or on Meetup to see all of our events. We have some lovely outdoor events coming up before the next assembly to keep us safe, but also together. We're going to do a group walk from Waterfront Park down to the harbor and then back on Saturday, January 29th in late afternoon. You'll get to see the sunset at the harbor, and it's gorgeous, and there's the brand new Rady Shell Performance Center there. The following Saturday, February 5th, we will be playing croquet again at Liberty Station and find out if the reigning champion will be able to retain the title. I have a note here: linen suits and British accents are not mandatory. That just assumes someone's going to come dressed like that, right? One can hope. Pinkies up. On February 12th in the early afternoon, we will do a new thing and walk our dogs together at the dog park on Fiesta Island. You don't have to have a dog to join in, but you will have to tolerate a lot of dogs. Light mayhem and such. The people who have RSVP'd already, people in quotation marks, are Apple, Bandit, Rufus, Josie, and Deacon. Well, that was it. That's a wrap up on our 20th Zoom assembly. Thanks all you Zoomblers, and we will see you next month, third Sunday of the month, again on Zoom, hoping to go back in person as soon as we can. That's it for Sunday Assembly. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to all our speakers. Have a great day.